Now for the news in detail. China's People's Liberation Army has urged India to strictly restrain its frontline forces in border areas. In a statement, the Western Theater Command of PLA said Delhi's provocative actions on Monday led to clashes in the Galwan Valley. The PLA spokesperson urged India to return to the right track and properly manage disputes. He said the valley has always been Chinese territory and Indian troops seriously violated the agreements on border issues. In a statement, Delhi has confirmed that Indian and Chinese troops have disengaged in the Galwan area. It added that the military remains committed to protecting the territorial integrity and sovereignty of India. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has expressed concern over reports of violence at the line of actual control between India and China. Guterres has urged both sides to exercise maximum restraint. Eri Kaneko, the associate spokesperson for the UN Secretary-General, said there are positive reports that the two countries have engaged to de-escalate the situation. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has said the Hindutva ideology is to be blamed for the current conflict. Qureshi said Beijing tried to resolve the border dispute, but Delhi continued construction in the disputed area. He said both China and Pakistan are opposed to India's illegal annexation of Kashmir in August last year. Washington says it is closely monitoring the dispute. In a statement, the State Department said it supports the desire to de-escalate expressed by both India and China. Pakistan, meanwhile, has rejected a statement by the Indian Foreign Ministry regarding the brief detention of two Indian High Commission staffers in Islamabad. The Foreign Office said the Indian officials were arrested for involvement in a hit-and-run case and possessing fake currency. It said they were released after identification and handed over to a senior diplomat from the Indian High Commission. It said a man was critically injured in the accident. It added that New Delhi is trying to distort the facts and deny the culpability of those officials in criminal offenses. Pakistan's top military brass has visited the Inter-Services Intelligence Headquarters in Islamabad, where they were given a briefing on national security. The visit comes amid increasing ceasefire violations along the line of control by Indian troops. The military's media wing said the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee General, Nadeem Raza, lauded the ISI's efforts for national security. Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa expressed satisfaction over the professional preparedness of the agency. The UN Chief Antonio Guterres has shown concern over child casualties in Indian-occupied Kashmir. In a report, Guterres called upon the Indian government to take preventive measures to protect children by ending the usage of pellet guns. The report said the United Nations has verified the killing of 8 children by Indian troops in the occupied valley. It also urged the Indian government to immediately release 68 children which were detained by occupation forces. The report said that the UN has verified over 25,000 grave violations against children globally from January to December 2019. Pakistan has recorded its highest one-day deaths by COVID-19 as 136 people lost their lives. The death toll has now risen to 2,975. The Health Ministry says that more than 5,800 cases were reported over the last day. The number of total infections has now crossed 154,000. Officials said that more than 58,000 patients have recovered so far. There are over 93,000 active cases in the country. The ministry said Punjab province has reported more than 58,000 cases and Sindh has recorded more than 57,000. There are some 19,000 infections in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and more than 8,000 in Balochistan. The capital Islamabad has reported over 9,000 cases, while Gilgit-Baltistan and Azad Jammu and Kashmir have reported nearly 1,900 cases. Brazil has registered a record 34,918 COVID-19 cases all in a day. while nearly 1,300 people died as the country's death toll has crossed 45,000. In the U.S., 840 more people have lost their lives over the past 24 hours as the toll surged to nearly 117,000. The global COVID-19 death count has now crossed 441,000 with more than 8.1 million infections. More on that now in this report.
As COVID-19 cases soar, the US has now lost more lives to the new coronavirus than the American deaths toll in World War I. In China, Beijing has shut all schools and cancelled over 1,200 flights amid fears of a second wave.
The situation of the outbreak has become extremely severe. Therefore, under the guidance of the expert team from the National Health Commission, we have recently organized experts to assess the development of the outbreak. According to the leading group for COVID-19 prevention and control in Beijing, we, after applying for approval in line with procedure, decided to raise the emergency response in Beijing from the 3rd level to the 2nd level, starting from this moment on June 16th.
In Europe, most of the countries have begun to ease lockdown restrictions and establish travel corridors. The UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson says London seeks unrestricted travel to Spain and France as soon as possible.
Just to say, obviously, I'll be talking to Emmanuel Macron about all sorts of ways in which we can bring our countries together, making sure that we eventually will be able to travel freely to and from each other's countries. Same goes obviously for Spain as soon as we can. The reason for having the quarantine system is very simple. We don't want to re-import the disease.
Meanwhile, New Zealand has deployed military to oversee the quarantine facilities and strengthen border checks after 2 new cases.
This case represents an unacceptable failure of the system. It should never have happened, and it cannot be repeated. From the beginning, we have taken an extraordinarily cautious approach at the border. That is why we have required every returning New Zealander to go into a facility that we manage.
Meanwhile, Mexico has reported almost 4,600 new infections, along with 730 fatalities in past 24 hours. In Honduras, President Juan Orlando Hernandez has been diagnosed with the coronavirus.
The Taliban say they have released 3 more Afghan soldiers in Kabul and Helmand provinces. The Taliban spokesperson Sohail Shaheen said the wounded soldiers were set free on humanitarian grounds and as a goodwill gesture. In a tweet, Shaheen said the freed soldiers were sent to their families for medical treatment after giving them the usual assistance. The Taliban and Kabul administration have agreed to free each other's prisoners under the Doha peace deal in February. Meanwhile, the U.S., Russia and the Afghan government have expressed satisfaction over the release of inmates to kickstart the intra-Afghan negotiations. North Korea has rejected South Korea's offer to send special envoys to ease escalating tensions and vowed to redeploy troops on border areas. The North's Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, said Pyongyang has flatly rejected the sinister proposal.
She also accused South Korea's President Moon Jae-in of being an American puppet and blamed him for failing the 2018 pact. Meanwhile, Seoul has slammed criticism directed at Moon, while the military has warned Pyongyang of stern response if it resorts to military action. In a statement, Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff said Pyongyang will pay the price if it impedes 2-decade-long efforts for peace in the Korean peninsula. The statement came hours after Pyongyang said it will deploy troops to Mount Komgang and Gisong near the border. Meanwhile, the US urged North Korea to refrain from taking further counterproductive actions after it blew up a joint liaison office over anti-Pyongyang leaflets.
Turkey says it has launched Operation Claw Tiger against Kurdish militants in northern Iraq. The Defense Ministry said Turkish forces are in the Haftanin region to operate against Kurdish Workers' Party fighters and other terrorist groups. The ministry said the special forces, along with surveillance and attack drones, have entered the region for an air operation. It said the latest operation is being carried out as part of Turkey's legitimate defense rights as per international law. Operation Claw Tiger is a follow-up operation of Claw Eagle that Turkey started on Monday. Ankara had claimed destroying 81 targets of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in that operation. Turkey holds the PKK responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year terror campaign. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Ankara, Moscow, and Tehran have agreed to hold dialogue on the Syrian settlement. He said the presidents of the three countries will speak via video conference and will later hold a summit in Tehran. Lavrov made that announcement following a meeting with his Iranian counterpart, Javad Zarif. The Russian foreign minister said a video conference may take place before the gathering of the Syrian Constitutional Committee. Lavrov said Russia's approach to the Syrian conflict can also be applied to Libya. He said Moscow is making efforts to convince Libya's warring sides to begin negotiations. Zarif said Tehran supports Russian and Turkish efforts in the country to end the conflict. The U.S. has called on world powers to demand Iran cooperate with the International Atomic Energy Agency. In a tweet, the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Iran's unprecedented obstruction is deeply concerning and unacceptable. Pompeo's remarks come after the Atomic Agency expressed concern at Tehran's denial to give access to its nuclear sites. The agency called on Iran to cooperate immediately with the forum. U.S. envoy for Iran, Brian Hook, has called for an open-ended arms embargo on Tehran. He said Washington believes an extension of an arms embargo should be done indefinitely without a fixed date. I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The UAE says it can work with Israel on some areas while still having political differences with the state. Speaking at a virtual conference, Foreign Affairs State Minister Anwar Gargash said the two countries can work on technology and the fight against COVID-19. Gargash said communication with Israel was important and will yield better results than other routes taken in the past. He said the UAE is against any annexation as being proposed by the Israeli government.
And we say we disagree with you on this. We don't think it's a good idea. But at the same time, there are areas such as COVID, technology, and other things that we can actually work together.
Well, Israel has no diplomatic relations with Gulf Arab countries, but common concerns over Iran's regional influence have led to a limited thaw in ties. Well, in the U.S., protesters have continued to demand police reform and abolishment of monuments honoring racist pro-slavery and colonial figures. A statue of Christopher Columbus in St. Louis has become the latest monument to be taken down in the protest against killing of an unarmed black man, George Floyd. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order aimed at improving police practices, saying Americans demand law and order. In the U.S. Capitol, senators have debated a legislation that concentrates more on data collection than on policy changes with regards to the use of lethal force. Democratic senators branded Trump's executive order as insufficient, saying the measure fell short of holding rule-breaking police officers accountable. However, Trump has opposed widespread demands of defunding and replacing the police with community initiatives.
And you have a governor that doesn't do a damn thing about it, and you have a mayor that doesn't know she's alive. She's talking about it's going to be a love fest this summer. Now, if they don't do the job, I'll do the job. And I've already spoken to the Attorney General about it. But if they don't do the job, we will do the job.
Minneapolis Police Chief Medaria Arredondo urged the public to let officers to do their jobs after some have reported threats and abuse. Thousands of health workers have protested in Paris against poor working conditions and low salaries. Demonstrators overturned a car and hurled projectiles at police lines. Riot police fired tear gas to disperse the crowd while firefighters rushed to extinguish a burning bin. The protest is part of the months-long movement backed by unions that had been put on pause due to COVID-19. The IMF chief economist Geeta Gopinath says both advanced and emerging market economies will be in recession in 2020. The global economy is on track for a more significant contraction than the International Monetary Fund estimated back in April. In an interview, Gopinath said that the forthcoming World Economic Outlook update is likely to show negative growth rates. She said the global economy would suffer the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s. The fund also said the current crisis is unlike anything the world has seen before. Asian stock markets are trading lower after the IMF projected further contraction of the global economy. Investors are treading cautiously and registering a muted activity. The Nikkei 225 is trading over 0.5% lower as Japan reported its exports plunged over 28% in May. Seoul's Kospi has lost a fraction. The Shanghai Composite is trading marginally lower. Hong Kong's Hang Seng is also trading flat. Meanwhile, the international benchmark Brent crude oil price has lost over 1%. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. For the latest updates on these and other stories, you can always follow us on our social media at Indus.News. Thanks for watching.